Rebecca died when she was 3. She was beaten to death. But hers is just one story. Behind each face are dozens of others. Every year, hundreds, possibly thousands of children die in the world's richest democracy, killed by people who are meant to care for them.
Clearly, it's a huge public health issue, and it's a major epidemic that we need to get a grasp on so it doesn't continue to spiral out of control.
Let's get right to a developing story tonight with the death of a 3-year-old boy. Mother and her friend charged tonight with manslaughter in the death of an 8-year-old girl.
If that was a health issue, so to speak, if that was kids developing bumps on their hands that made them they couldn't write, that'd be an epidemic.
Police say she was forced into a Foot Locker.
Today, a 2-year-old is in the hospital with a damaged liver, a broken arm.
I am so tired of a lack of response to this issue.
She was 4 years old. She had her whole life in front of her.
Child abuse is completely preventable.
While at the scene, investigators found 2 siblings, ages 7 and 6.
We are breeding an army of future child abusers.
It was March 2007. San Antonio was in full bloom when on this street, residents realized that something had gone wrong.
In there.
Yeah, because there was a gap right there where that gap's at.
Yeah.
Thomas told me they came here looking for a dead animal.
Plastic bag.
Instead, they found bodies of 2 babies.
And put the baby under there.
So the baby was under that gap?
Yeah, she was in
but
there
on this side?
She was in there for like 3 months.
3 months?
Yeah.
During the investigation and trial that followed, their mother, Valerie Lopez, admitted to beating her 18-month-old daughter, Saria, to death because she wouldn't stop crying. Weeks later, she also killed her 4-month-old son, Sebastian, and buried him next to his sister. Valerie Lopez and her boyfriend are now in prison for life. 4 years on, their flat is still up for rent. The community here is still in shock. But elsewhere in the US, thousands of other children have died since, in circumstances just as chilling.
Child abuse is a crime like no other. It happens behind closed doors to those who often have no voice. It's difficult to detect, even more difficult to investigate, and it's extremely hard to come to terms with. No family, no community wants to admit that it's failing to protect its children. And yet, more and more people here, doctors, educators, congressmen, are warning that in the United States, child abuse is a problem of endemic proportions.
While it happens everywhere, better reporting of child abuse makes statistics more reliable in the industrialized world. The only available comparative UN report from 2003 estimates that every week, on average, 2 children die from abuse in Britain and in Germany, 3 in France, 4 in Japan, and 27 in the United States. The combined population of these countries is bigger than the US, but the rate in the US is 3 times higher. The question is why? In America, individualism is sacred. In Texas, they pride themselves on being more independent, more self-sufficient than anywhere else. We came to Texas because everything is bigger here. The latest data from 2009 shows that 267 children died from abuse here, more than in any other state. Officials say they are better at reporting deaths, but as we traveled across Texas, we found reasons behind these staggering numbers that are far more complex. In her father's memory, Emma will always be 4.
She'd be sitting on a couch, and I'd be sitting right next to her. She'd look at me, and I look at her. And I'd ask her, "Are you Daddy's baby?" And she'd laugh. She'd go, "No, I'm Mommy's baby." I'd feign outrage. What? And she started laughing. I said, no, you're Daddy's baby. And she just laughed. And then the final weekend she was over, I asked her if she was Daddy's baby. She just said yes. She just said yes.
We have an update now on breaking news we first brought you on Live at 5. A mother sentenced to prison for not protecting her little girl from abuse.
Once the lights were shown on Emma, there was bruising all over her body. On her stomach, she had a busted lip, bruising all over her face, on her chin area, on her legs. This child was beaten and bruised so badly.
Soon after she left Ben Thompson, Emma's mother, Abigail Young, moved in with her boyfriend Lucas Coe. He had previous history of child abuse. Lucas Coe was sentenced to life in prison for raping and killing Emma. Abigail is serving a 20-year sentence for failing to prevent her daughter's death. 3 weeks before she died, Emma was diagnosed with genital herpes. Doctors reported it to CPS, the Child Protection Services. After Emma's death, CPS said that sexually transmitted disease was not enough of a reason to remove a child from home.
Everybody had a chance to save Emma.
Everyone missed the signs.
Everybody missed the signs. There was signs for my family that came this close. There were signs that CPS missed. There were signs that the doctors missed.
I've had cases on this exact road. You really can't judge a neighborhood and determine, or a person's income to determine whether or not there's abuse or neglect happening there. With me being an investigator, I put nothing past anyone.
John Paul's job is to go from house to house, investigating abuse that happens behind closed doors. He wasn't involved in Emma's case, but for him, it was a reminder of what happens if he fails. The problem, he says, is that it's easy to fail. John Paul is currently investigating 38 families. That's more than double the recommended caseload.
The main reason a lot of the investigators are afraid to voice their opinion and go public is because of fear of losing their job.
He wasn't authorized to talk to us, but he said he felt it was necessary to do so.
I've seen so much happen within the almost 5 years that I've been with the agency that I feel as if the investigators that are out there doing the hard work, feet are on the ground, making sure these children are safe and everything else, they're not being heard by the upper level management. I think what a lot of people need to realize also is that just like you have police officers that get burnt out, you can have investigators that get burnt out.
Overworked and underpaid officers and a slow and often inefficient chain of command are not the only reasons why so many children fall through the cracks of the system.
Look at this.
The former chief prosecutor for Harris County believes that the very philosophy of child protection in the U.S. is a problem. The agency, he says, focuses too much on keeping families together because that's what the federal government, which is a major funder, wants it to do. Randy Burton now owns this upscale Houston law firm. That's how he pays for providing free legal services for children in trouble. His cabinets are full of stories of children that were killed because they were allowed to stay at home.
In order to preserve the influx of federal money, which is over half the money that states get for child welfare, it's become an end in itself that we're going to make not reasonable efforts, we're going to make every effort to try to preserve these families. And so in a state like Texas that brags it has the lowest rate of removal from homes in the nation, it's not surprising that they also have the highest number of child fatalities in the nation.
Within weeks of Emma's death, 2 more toddlers were killed in Texas. Both, like Emma, were under the watch of Child Protection Services. The agency launched an internal investigation into the deaths. Nobody was fired.
Generally, we don't talk about case-specific information, but there are some times when a woman or a man, whoever we're investigating, lies to us, and we believe their lies.
Surely the fact that the 4-year-old had genital herpes was an indication.
And we certainly investigated, and we certainly had medical indications that herpes can be caused by other things, and that they believe the assertions of the parents.
Up to 40% of children who die from abuse in the US have files with the Child Protection Services.
How do you know the child?
This makes it very easy for the critics to blame the agency, not for the lack of desire to save kids, but for being too much of a slow, clumsy bureaucracy. But some say critics are missing a bigger point.
A lot of things that people need to remember about Child Protective Services is their job is about protecting children after the fact. Okay, their role isn't to keep children from being harmed in the first place. That's a huge point that I think the public needs to understand. I think it's all of our job to protect children in the first place.
More than 30,000 children are already in foster care in Texas. The system is overloaded. Every year, hundreds of children come through St. PJ's foster home as they wait for the government to find them a new family or to decide if it's safe enough for them to return to their parents. Some spend months here, others years. And no matter how many scars, how many bruises they were brought here with, all of them, teachers say, and especially the little ones, are desperate to go home.
Hey ho, nobody home, no food, no drink, no money.
Child abuse is possibly the only crime in which the victim simply doesn't know that something has gone wrong.
Nobody home.
This TV campaign is an attempt by St. PJ's to start a public dialogue about child abuse. It's not easy.
That taboo got broken about having breast cancer. We need that on this issue. We need the heavies to help break this issue. We need a first lady of the United States to help break this issue.
Dallas Children's is one of the biggest pediatric hospitals in the US. From cancer to heart transplants, they do everything here. And yet, child abuse accounts for 37% of the hospital's deaths. And they believe numbers are on the rise.
I see more cases in our hospital setting and increasing violence. There are days I'm still shocked. I think the cases that involve multiple children in one home are some of the more striking. A particular kind of scenario would be sibling sets who are chronically and severely neglected, torture type cases where like 3 siblings locked in a bathroom for 9 to 12 months. Skin and bones, physically abused, sexually abused, tortured, long periods of time.
Dr. Matt Cox is one of the few pediatricians in the country specializing in abuse. He runs an abuse and neglect clinic and sees, on average, 5 patients a day. Diagnosing them is often difficult.
Most kids don't look like the battered baby that we think about when we talk about battered child syndrome. When we talk about battered child, we think of bruises and whip marks and burns. Most child abuse doesn't look like that. Most of the kids who are abused in the more severe forms have internal injuries with no external manifestation. So doctors have to be aware of it. Doctors have to think about it, because if we don't think about it as a physician, we'll miss the diagnosis. And that's where education and training of doctors is really important.
Currently, most US medical students get only a day's worth of lectures on child abuse throughout their entire education. Not these students. Dr. Cox makes sure they learn plenty about it, and not only inside the hospital. We joined Dr. Cox as he took his students to a courthouse in a nearby town. Testifying in cases of child abuse is part of his routine.
So it's a 6-month-old little girl. I was one of the pediatricians who saw her when she was hospitalized in October, and she had a head injury and required surgery.
We're allowed to go in without a camera. Medical evidence is often decisive, in child abuse investigations. And during the debrief after his testimony, Dr. Cox tells his students this will be a big part of their work.
There's a lot more to the story than what was presented in there, but ultimately I'm concerned about the safety of the child, not only because of the injury, but how does a kid fall out of a window like that?
How do you prepare for the case? I mean, do you go through that study paper?
Normally, because this case is one that's been set a couple times, so I've read through it a couple times. This was 10 months ago, and in that time I've seen well over 1,000 other kids. I don't remember every detail. So documenting in the record's important. Okay?
How often are you called as a witness?
Too often. Average about once a week. Wow. I think we couldn't fathom what kind of environment they live in.
In Washington, some politicians are beginning to recognize what many told us is a real national crisis.
Our role here today is to be a voice for the voiceless.
The congressional report discussed at this hearing says that the current numbers of child deaths are in fact a gross underestimate.
I've been here for almost 25 years, and I attended many hearings, but this has been one of the most painful.
In 2009, 1,770 children died from abuse, according to the official data. The real number, according to Congress, could be 2,500. Expert witnesses explained why the government had to play a more active role.
States certainly need emergency help now for child protection, as their resources are dwindling while child abuse and neglect is increasing.
Hi, Kayla.
Here is an example of a program that many believe can prevent abuse. Crystal is a qualified nurse. Every week for the next 2 years, she will visit little T, because the state of Texas says that he fits the criteria of a child at risk. Only one person in this family of 10 has a job. Nobody has health insurance, and little T's parents just turned 18. While causes behind child abuse are complex, statistics show that it is more common in areas with high rates of poverty and teenage pregnancy.
At this point, lots of new parents will get so frustrated and so overwhelmed that they either throw the baby down on the couch or shake the baby.
Kyla and Anthony are determined to be good parents, but they say teenagers need help.
Even now, sometimes I get frustrated because he's crying, I don't know what to do, but I'm not gonna hurt myself. I mean, I'm conscious about what I'm doing, but it does sound like a lot of parents that are, especially dads, because some of them just feel like they're teenagers, they should be going out having fun, and instead they're stuck inside with the baby that's crying, and they're gonna get frustrated, and they're gonna do something that they will regret later, but it happens.
So if you ever get concerned, this is a chart.
Prevention could be an important part of the solution, but because of the recession and budget cuts, dozens of states, including Texas, are cutting their prevention budgets, leaving millions of children without any safety net.
It's like all of us walking around and knowing that there's this thing like antibiotics out there, and we just refuse to take them, and we keep getting sick.
A tireless campaigner and the creator of the nurse visiting program in Texas, Madeline McClure says it's getting harder to push prevention programs through the Texas legislature.
I think legislators from both sides absolutely love and adore children. I don't think they're adequately educated on the consequences of abuse and how they're paying for it right this second. They look at Medicaid costs going this way, they look at Medicare costs going this way, they look at prison costs going this way, remedial education. Guess what? This is one of the most important roots of all evil and ill in our society.
But that's just me. I can see a jury having a tough time with this one, though. Sure.
The televised trial of a Florida woman, Stacey Canaan. She was accused of helping her brother to kill their parents. Prosecutors said abuse that they experienced in their childhood was a motive in the murder. Stacey was found innocent. She agreed to talk to us about what it was like to grow up in an abusive home.
Crying was forbidden in my house. You cried, you got beat more. You made a sound when you got hit more. You made a sound or tried to move when you got raped, it lasted longer, it got more violent. You just took it and dealt with it and just got up the next day. Once you're abused, you don't know anything else but anger and violence, and that's all you know how to live, and you really have to work at it to change it.
40 years on, Stacy is still in therapy. Her brother is in jail for murdering their parents.
The more damaged our children become, the more damaged our society becomes, and we need to open doors for these kids to get help, and we need to make it affordable for people to get help.
A study done by the U.S. Justice Department in a New York prison found that 68% of inmates were abused as children.
Those numbers are adding up, and they're adding up in a terrible way, I think, for the future of our country.
Across the United States, many are trying to break the cycle of violence that starts in childhood. But it's a battle they will win only when the rest of America acknowledges the problem.
How could our society allow this to happen? How do we not put more effort into preventing this? Preparing parents to be parents would be one way. To support parents when they're in a time of need would be another way. And our government just doesn't do that. That's not a priority. There are other things that are deemed more important.
Until that changes, every 6 hours, a child will die from abuse in the United States. Before we left Texas, another boy was beaten to death outside Dallas. Brendan was 2 years old.